Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic 90s nerds, to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, like books! And today, yes, we're talking books, so we're talking that in-between area. And I'm really excited because I'm going to be talking about one of my 23 books to read in 2023 list. And yes, you did not mishear me. I said one of my lists because I already have a video up about the 23 newer horror books I want to read in 2023. But this video today that I'm releasing is the list of 23 vintage horror books that I want to read in 2023. I'm a big fan of old school horror. We're talking about old school paperbacks from hell type of books. And I don't want to neglect my old school reading just because I want to get to some newer books. So this is my list of 23 priority books that are a little bit older that I want to make sure I get to in 2023. So let's go to the short intro. When we come back, I will go through with you the 23 books. Alright guys, I only own about 11 of these 23 books, so I don't have a lot of these physically. I'll try to put up pictures. Alright, so the first big priority, and this is actually my book club pick for the month of February in 2023, is Swan Song by Robert McCammon. This is not a vintage copy, this is a new edition. Yes, it is chunky, and that is why I'm hoping if anyone wants to join in, they will feel like they have enough time and they won't be rushed. This has an amazing audiobook apparently, so I'm also excited about that. I am buddy reading this with my friend Amy over from Amy Noel Reads. Check out her channel, it will be linked below. She has already read this, so she'll be rereading it. I'll be reading it for the first time. Robert McCammon, if you didn't know, is one of my favorite authors of all time. He probably is my #1 favorite author. I just love his writing, and his book, Boy's Life, is currently my all-time favorite book. So we will see. I've heard this one is a lot of people's favorite book of all time. So will this measure up and be close to how I feel about Boy's Life? This is kind of like a post-apocalyptic story. People say that it reminds them a lot of The Stand. So think of The Stand, but I've heard from my friend Nathan, aka his full name, Nathaniel Toll, who wrote the book Pumpkin Cinema. I've heard that actually this is a better version of The Stand. So I'm excited. I have read The Stand. I do really like The Stand, but there are some problems with The Stand. It isn't perfect. So if this fixes some problems and is better than The Stand, then hell yeah, I'm in. So yes, if you guys want to join us, make sure you read this in February, and Amy and I will chat about this on my channel live in March, after February is over. So you have plenty of time if you want to pick it up and join us. Also, I do want to say, I know my friend Marcy over at the channel Marcy Reads, check out her channel, and my friend Daisy, she's on Instagram, check out her Instagram, I will link that below. They just did a group read of Swan Song where they broke it up over a couple of months. So if you read along with them, which I hope you did, because I wish I could have, but I just didn't have the time during the months they were reading it, then join us for our discussion, because you will already have read this book if you read it with them earlier, than we're getting to it, so that'll be great. Next up, I have The Other by Thomas Tryon. I have read 2 other books by Thomas Tryon and have loved them. Of course, one was Night of the Moonbow, which is not really completely a horror story. Sorry, Jackson is moving my tripod, apparently. He's laying down, like, right in front of my little stool that my tripod is resting on. Anyway, sorry. So, Night of the Moonbow, like I said, I read that one and enjoyed. Different type of book than I expected, but still really great character development. And the other one was awesome. It was Harvest Home, a slow burn, very, very slow burn, but folk horror that's ramped up at the end, and the tension just builds and builds. I really loved it. Also great character development in that. And so if the other is similar to either of those, I'll be pleased with how the story plays out. Next up, Killer by Peter Tonkin. This is an animal attack book about a killer whale, aka an orca. And apparently there is a book called Orca, which I do have a vintage copy, and I do have a vintage copy of The Killer as well. But Orca apparently isn't very good, according to my friend Andrew. Check out his channel. It came from the page. He said, Kelsi, just read Killer. Don't read Orca. I do like the cover to Orca, so at least I didn't waste money. Even though it's not as good of a story, I'm still glad to own the cover, and I might read it anyway one day. We'll see. But I am really excited to read Killer, and I have a vintage copy, but I don't want to mess it up, so I'm excited because Valancourt Books, check out their company. It's great because they're re-releasing old school horror books that are out of print. They're releasing them in newer editions. So thank goodness for them, because that is very, very important in my opinion. I don't want old school horror and these older books we can't find to disappear and die out. So readers who are interested can find these in new editions thanks to them. So they're releasing a new edition of The Killer with the same vintage copy on this new edition. So awesome, awesome. I'm going to be buying it so that I can use the newer edition to read and not hurt my vintage copy. Next up, Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. This is another coming-of-age horror book. I had a few coming-of-age horror books on my 23 books to read in 2023 list that was newer books. This one is, of course, an older horror book, and it's a classic. People say you got to get to it, and I heard there's some, dark elements, some horror elements, some fantastical elements, and I'm just really intrigued. I've heard so many wonderful things about Dan Simmons' writing, so finally, it's about time I discover, what I feel about it firsthand. Next up, I already read 3 books by Ruby Jean Jensen, so this will be the 4th book I read by her. I want to read Wait and See, because I hear it's bonkers, fun, kind of plays out more like a horror movie in written form, so that'll be interesting. I don't know too many specifics, and I don't want to know too many specifics. I just want to go in. I'm hoping it'll be my new favorite Ruby Jean Jensen book, because I've enjoyed all of her books, but there's always like a couple of things that I don't overly love in terms of either it's the pacing or it's the length or something. So maybe this will be one that I absolutely adore. We'll see. Next, The Wells of Hell by Graham Masterton. I've read a few Graham Masterton books so far. I actually recently saw that Will Errickson read this and thought it was a lot of fun, and Will Errickson, of course, runs the blog Too Much Horror Fiction. Check out his blog, I will link it below. Really, really enjoy his opinions on horror, and he's such an expert on everything vintage horror and everything Paperbacks from Hell, and so, of course, he helped co-write Paperbacks from Hell, so no wonder he's an expert. He is awesome and an authority, and whenever he expresses interest in a book, I take notice. And I already owned it, so once he shouted it out, I was like, hell yeah. So
there's this water in a small town that turns a hideously sinister color, 2 kids disappear, and an unimaginable horror has its way with a young person, and the body of a young woman is discovered, the gory remains of a soulless feast. Far beneath the town, a torrent of evil as old as Satan has broken through the barriers to a new life. At first a trickle, now it's a torrent of destruction, devouring fresh victims for a demonic race that springs from the wells of hell.
Hell yeah. No pun intended. Or whatever, no intended. I am so sorry if you guys noticed that I switched positions a little bit. Jackson's been moving the stool a little tiny bit where I have my tripod, as well as I had to go and get back on sprints because I'm in the middle of sprinting with my good friends Lexi from Books with Lexi, Kaylee from Kaylee's Books, and Amy from Amy Noel Reads, and we're having so much fun. It's the best. I love them so much. Anyway, so I think I left off, the last one I talked about was The Wells of Hell, and next up I want to read my first Bentley Little book, which I chose The Mailman, because I've heard good things about that one. I heard that one's crazy and fast, and guys, if you guys know of any Bentley Little books that are better than The Mailman, like what should I start with? Is The Mailman a good first choice? If you are a little reader, not little as in tiny, but if you're a Bentley Little reader, what do you suggest I start with? Especially if you've read more than one of his books. Let me know, but I, for right now, am putting The Mailman on my list of 23 books to read in 2023. All right, next up, I haven't read a Dean Koontz book in a while, so the next one I want to get to is dun, 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 Twilight Eyes. I've heard some great stuff about this book. I think part of it takes place at a carnival, and yes, you can see kind of in the background carnival setting. I got this at a used bookstore, so obviously it's super beat up. That's okay. It's a reading copy. I'm not collecting it for the cover or anything. It says,
they're out there, waiting, watching, unseen by normal eyes, but all too visible to Slim Mackenzie, a young man blessed or cursed by Twilight Eyes. Lurking in the darkest shadows of an eerie moonlight carnival, they're out there, feeding their twisted needs with human suffering and fiendishly plotting the downfall of the human race. They're out there, but don't scream, they'll hear you.
So, something is out there at the carnival, doing something. I don't know, but very, very, very interested to see where this goes, and because I've heard such good things, I'm extra pumped to get to it. Another book with a carnival/amusement park type of setting, The Eyes of the Beast by Steve Harris. Now, I believe this is known under the name, I think it's Adventureland in the UK. So there's 2 different titles that it was released under. Let me see if it says it on the inside. Yes, Adventureland. So this is the American version, The Eyes of the Beast, and I hauled this a long time ago. It's not in the greatest shape, but look at this cover, though. Look at this freaking clown. Like Funhouse entrance or something. Marvelous stuff. These kids are battling some evil, so this kind of seems like it's a coming-of-age book as well, which makes me extra pumped to pick it up because I love coming-of-age horror. Next up, my friend Ollie over at the channel Criminale. Check out his channel. He released a really great video about 10 books you probably haven't heard of but should definitely read, and this was one of the books, Dearest by Peter Lorraine? Anyway, I realized I have that book because the cover is very recognizable with this creepy bandaged face. But once he said that, I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to check it out if he read it and said it was good, because I really trust Ollie's opinion. I like his reading tastes a lot. He does read a little bit more crime than me and kind of pulpy stuff, but he reads vintage horror, and I've just found that we have similar tastes in the few things that we've had in common from what we've both read. So yeah, and check out his channel again. It's fantastic. He really is a wonderful booktuber. Next up, Burnt Offerings. Now, this is like a haunted house type of story, but it takes a little bit different of a spin on it, and I've heard Stephen King talk about this book as being an inspiration. I can't remember if it was for The Shining or for what, but he really likes this book, and I feel like this is a classic I have to get to, a classic old school horror book in general that a lot of people have already read, but I have not, so that's why I have to finally get to it and see how I feel about it. Now, this is a new edition. It's not an old school edition. You could see the little statue looking thing with the V. That is for Valancourt. So this is a new edition printed by Valancourt Books. Again, support what they're doing because they're keeping vintage horror alive, and that is very important. Another new edition printed by Valancourt. This is The Cook by Harry Cressing, and I've heard very interesting things about this.
It opens with Conrad, nearly 7 feet tall, gaunt and dressed all in black, arriving on his bicycle in the town of Cobb. He quickly secures a job as a cook for the wealthy Hill family, winning their hearts and stomachs with his delectable dishes, and before long he has everyone around him eating out of his hand. But Conrad has a sinister, inscrutable plan in view, and after becoming master of their palates, next may be their souls.
Hell yeah! I never hear anyone talking about this lately, so I'm gonna check it out and see what it's like. So, hell yeah, can't wait. Next up, Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. I have not read this. This is another classic horror type of book. It's got some incest stuff involved in it. It's definitely about family drama. I feel like it's a book that a lot of people have read, but I have not, so that is why it is on my list. The next couple are a little bit trashy, and that's why I have them here, because I think they're going to be a lot of fun. I think you pronounce it Nelfs, or I think the G is silent. So it's Gnelfs by Sydney Williams. This, you can find a Kindle edition if you don't have a physical copy. And I just think this premise sounds ridiculous. I think it's these little creatures or something like that comes to life, and these kids have to deal with them. Next up, another trashy book, The Cats by Nick Sharman. Again, you could find this on Kindle, and it just seems ridiculous. It's about killer cats. I don't know how good it's going to be. I'm a little nervous it's not going to be good at all, but that's okay. Another book, The Season of the Witch by Charlie Jacob. My friend Alex over at the channel The Bookubus. She is the queen of vintage horror. I really take her suggestions very seriously, and she very highly praised the author Charlie Jacob. And so I know she talked about this symbiotic fascination, which I do want to read, but I actually own both that and The Season of the Witch, and I kind of want to read The Season of the Witch because it just sounds very intriguing. It sounds like it's got some occult stuff going on, and Alex read that one and enjoyed it too, so I'm going to check that out. Alright, next up, Night Runners by Joe R. Lansdale, and I have read a book by Joe R. Lansdale before, but it's time I read another one. And this one I've heard very good things about. I hear it's pretty brutal, kind of splatterpunk-ish, very extreme. This is Night Runners, and I just really want to get to it. Next up, Ash Wednesday by Chet Williamson. I've been wanting to read a Chet Williamson book, and this one just seemed like a good one to choose. Next, Golem by Edward Lee. He also writes kind of extreme splattery horror, so that one should be fun, and you could find a Kindle version of that online. Next up, Shivers by William Scholl. I've heard really good things from Donnie about this author, William Scholl, and there's a lot of books I could have chosen, but I chose Shivers. There's, like, I think a statue on the cover. Not really sure what some of these are about. I've just heard great things, and that is why a lot of these are on my list, so that is why I'm not giving you guys the synopses of every single book. So if it sounds interesting to you, or if you just want to jump on the bandwagon along with me, go ahead. Also, some of this list might change for this particular vintage list because my friend Katrina will be digging into a lot more paperbacks from hell soon, and so I might alter some of my list to read some of the same books as her, or just add it on top of my list, because even though this is a list of 23, it doesn't mean I'm just going to read 23 paperbacks from hell in 2023. It just means that these are a priority in 2023. I could add more, I could switch out some of these, it depends. So again, this is just tentative, but I just wanted to have a list because what? I love making lists. I just love lists. A book that a lot of people praise pretty highly, All Heads Turn When the Hunt Goes by John Ferris. I have not read one thing by John Ferris, and that is why I need to start next year and actually read one of his books, and this is the one I'm choosing to start with. Apparently, I think there's a big battle or a big bloody scene in this book. I can't remember. Again, some of these books, the less I know, the better, just because I don't want to read too much into it and get things spoiled. Some things it's better not to know going in. Next up, The Moorstone Sickness by Bernard Taylor. I've already read a book by Bernard Taylor, but I liked it, but I didn't absolutely love it. My friend Kelly over at the channel Kelly Hooked on Books, who, by the way, reads a vintage horror book every single month of the year with her book club, the From Hell Book Club, so check out that and check out her channel. She actually loves Bernard Taylor, and she liked The Moorstone Sickness, so I'm going to take a page out of her book because she's pretty tough critic, so if she likes it, I usually pay pretty close attention to the book she likes, so I will be checking this out. And last but not least, If You Could See Me Now by Peter Straub. I mentioned earlier in another part of my video that Will Errickson liked the Wells of Hell book, but he also liked If You Could See Me Now and praised it very, very highly recently on his blog and on his social media. And so that got me very, very, very interested in picking it up. So I'm going to read it next year and see if I like it as much as Will Errickson does, just because I think it'd be interesting to compare and contrast what I think about it versus what he had to say about it. Alright guys, that is all the books that I want to read in terms of vintage horror, in terms of priority reads for 2023. What old school horror books are you trying to read next year? Shout it down in the comments below. Have you read any of these? Are there any that you absolutely think I shouldn't read? And why, but no spoilers? Are there some that you second I read, like you really think I should read for sure? Let me know that in the comments below too. Or do you have a suggestion that's not on the list that you think I should definitely read? I'm always looking for more paperback from hell suggestions, so shout those out below, please, 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 and thank you. And also, another thank you for just hanging with me during this long video. I appreciate you guys. You guys know that I always treasure your time, and really, really am honored that you choose to spend some of it by watching my videos. Thank you once again. Alright guys, but for this time, that is it for me. Till next time, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it. Bye guys!